Welcome to the Year of the Movie podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from the year of the movie 2023. We're your hosts, and we started this podcast because 2023 was kind of a goofy year for movies. You had really weird movies, like 80 for Brady, Strays, 65, and more. But you also had really great movies like Linoleum and The Holdovers and
They cloned
Tyrone. And, two of those you might not have heard of outside of this podcast or at all if you've not been listening to our podcast. And if you have been listening to our podcast, go ahead and listen to this podcast. And if you like the podcast, consider supporting us on Patreon. It's $5 a month. You get some bonus content. That bonus content will grow and grow the more patrons we have. Also, follow us on Instagram at Virtual Cocktail.
Rate and review
on our podcast platforms, wherever you're listening, and subscribe on YouTube. Hit that like button, ring that bell, ding-a-ding-a-ding. And today, we're talking about the movie that I'm sure you've all heard of, Pinball, The Man Who Saved the Game. What is that about?
So, a seamless transition into the synopsis of this movie.
It's really seamless when you
ask the question.
You also say what we're then leading into.
Yeah. So this is the story of Roger Sharpe, the young Midwesterner who overturned New York City's 35-year-old ban on pinball machines. What were your first impressions when you heard about this movie? Did you hear about this movie?
I did hear about this movie, probably in my search for 2023 movies, but I know I heard about it. I saw a trailer, and I was like, cool, I like pinball. I could not tell, though, if it was a documentary or a narrative.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if we would be talking about it, and then I, discovered it was a narrative, and I was like, well, we'll watch it eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like pinball. What were your thoughts?
I'm trying to remember when I first heard about it. I feel like I probably saw a poster or a trailer or something at some point in early 23 or late 2022. And I remember, I think we were at Gen Con or something. And people were talking about the movie because like someone was related to a pinball documentary that was going on there.
Yeah.
So like that was related. And then this movie, depending on the streaming platform, I think listed as 2022. So it was like, I heard good things about it, and it was like, ah, man, we can't talk about it. But loophole.
Loophole. It did come out in the internet, and we'll get there later. But
yeah. So generally positive. Could not tell you the exact moment that I heard about this movie. Yeah. So the trailer, it establishes that there's like an interview set up with present day Roger Sharpe. It quickly hits on the big aspects of his life, like he's divorced, he's trying to become a writer, he's beginning a new relationship. And then Roger says that pinball may be the thing that he's best at, and the trailer shows that pinball is a big part of Roger's life. He's good at it, it helps him focus, and then it reveals about halfway through the trailer that pinball was illegal in New York in 1975 when this movie takes place. And then there are clips of Roger playing in City Hall and saying he wants to redeem the game. It sets up the general story of like, if you know about the history of pinball, then you know like the exact moment and like time and place and everything that this is happening. If you don't know the history of pinball, you're learning about a nice young man. And then like halfway through, then there's a random history fact that most people probably haven't heard of. So it's a pretty good trailer. Yeah.
Cool.
The movie.
The cast was Mike Faced. I assume that's how you pronounce it.
I do too. I've only ever seen it written.
Yep. As Roger Sharpe. Crystal Reed as Ellen. Dennis Boutsikaris as Mr. Sharpe. Christopher Convery as Seth. Connor Ratliff as Jimmy. Toby Regbo as James Hamilton. Mike Doyle as Jack Haber. Brian Batt as Harry Koulianos. Eric William Morris as Danny Frank.
There are other people that are like significant side characters. There's a lot of people in this movie that I feel like you recognize that face from things.
Yeah.
But I listed these people that are like the most significant to the big scenes and stuff. I think Ellen's last name is Reed, but she's only credited as Ellen on IMDb. So yeah, we'll go through the plot breakdown. This is all from my memory because Wikipedia did not have a plot breakdown for this. So if I forgot anything,
weirdly, this movie that you've definitely heard of,
yeah,
is not covered.
It boggles my mind that Beautiful Disaster had a longer Wikipedia article than this movie. Like, even if you take away the controversy about the author of the Beautiful Disaster series, like, that included a plot summary. And this is like, this movie came out and people were in it.
Well, that's because Beautiful Disaster is a masterpiece.
It's a piece of cinema.
So.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So, an older Roger Sharpe sits down for an interview about the greatest shot he ever took. He tells the filmmakers that to tell the story, he needs to go back to the beginning. We see a young Roger Sharpe in his college bar, discovering pinball and slowly getting better over time. He gains a small audience as his skills improve. Fast forward in time, and Roger talks about moving to New York with his new wife. She wants him to work in her family's furniture store, but Roger wants to be a writer and gets a job in advertising. Things quickly fall apart between the two, and they divorce. Roger's company does some restructuring, and he loses his job around the same time. There's a good scene in this where they're signing the divorce papers and his ex-wife says, well, now you've signed, or like you've written something significant.
Yeah.
And then just his facial expression with the giant mustache that he has in this movie is very good. That scene is in the trailer. So Roger begins the job hunting process. He doesn't have much experience, so his portfolio is a bit thin, and he's constantly told that his choices are safe. During one of his unlucky days trying to find work, Roger hears something he didn't realize he missed in New York, a pinball machine. He follows the sound inside an adult bookstore. Roger quickly gets into a routine of going to the bookstore as often as possible and becomes friendly with Jimmy, the guy at the store counter. After playing pinball one day, Roger goes to yet another job interview. On the way there, he meets a woman in the elevator. He has a slightly awkward conversation with her, but he still gets her number. He interviews with Gentlemen's Quarterly, who are trying to appeal to a more mainstream, straight audience. They need someone who's safe. Roger gets a test assignment from them. He goes back to the bookstore and hugs the pinball machine. Roger goes on a date with the woman from the elevator, Ellen. She quickly tells him she has an 11-year-old son, she's divorced, she's older than him, and she wants to get married again and have more kids. Roger wants to keep seeing her, and the two slowly start a relationship. Things are going okay at GQ, but Roger is struggling to come up with new material. He goes to try and clear his head at the bookstore and play pinball, but when he gets there, the police are taking away the machines. Roger is shocked, and he learns that pinball is illegal in New York. Roger looks into pinball more, finds out that you can get your own machine at home, and that's legal. He decides to write about pinball for GQ, with their photographer James helping take pictures. He has plenty of material, and his boss Jack tells him they need one article, not a book. Cut to Roger meeting with a publisher, making a deal for a coffee table book with photos of the machines and articles about the history of pinball. Cut again to Ellen and Seth at Roger's apartment, where he uncovers his own pinball machine that he bought with the book advance. Somewhere in the middle of this, Roger meets more with an organization advocating to overturn the pinball ban. One of their members, Danny Frank, tries to get Roger to testify to city council that pinball is fun and to provide historical context for the game. Roger turns Danny down, saying that he supports the efforts, but he isn't the right guy. Roger and James go to Chicago, where many of the pinball machines are built and designed. Pinball is also banned in Chicago. At first, no one wants to talk to Roger, as they're used to only getting bad press, but he convinces them that the unspoken industry of pinball needs a spotlight. Roger starts getting interviews with everyone in the industry, learning about pinball, and he keeps hearing that he needs to speak with Harry Williams. Roger returns to New York, and things aren't going well with Seth's father. Roger steps in and takes Seth to a father-son bowling night. Ellen thanks him. He says it isn't a big deal, and she says maybe not to you. Roger continues to work on the book, transcribing his interviews. Ellen types the pages for Roger since she's much faster, and Seth plays pinball while they work. Danny Frank continues to try and get Roger involved in testifying, but he says he's just too busy to commit to anything else. He gets another phone call, and it's Harry Williams. He says he'll speak to Roger if he flies out to see him in California. Roger talks to Ellen, saying that the book advance is all gone, and he's already spending his own money to get this book made. She says she never looked for money in a husband, and Roger gets a little squirmy. He asks if they can talk about that more once his book is finished. In order to pay for his trip to California, Roger sells his pinball machine. Roger interviews Harry and learns about specific details Harry designed to comply with the anti-gambling legislation. After he transcribes the interview, the book is finished. Roger, Ellen, and Seth go get pizza at a bowling alley to celebrate. Ellen begins to talk about their relationship, how it already feels like they've been a family together, and Roger leaves at the first opportunity when Seth calls him over to a pinball machine. They're both disappointed in the pinball. It has very minimal controls and just isn't fun. Roger meets with his publisher, who wants to completely change his book. She says it'll have his name on the cover, and that's what really matters for a first-time author, but they want to get rid of all the interviews and focus on the pictures. She says no one wants to read that much about pinball, and Roger says he does. Frustrated, he goes to Ellen's apartment and tells her about the meeting. He says he's thinking of scrapping the whole book if he can't be what he set out to make, that those people deserve to have their stories told. She tells him not to get rid of everything if it isn't perfect, and Roger snaps that this comes from the woman who hides her art in her closet. She's an artist.
Yep.
Yeah. They fight, Roger leaves, and Seth watches him go. With everything else around him in chaos, Roger decides to help Danny Frank. He meets with the organization and they fill him in on their plan. Their strategy, adult content is all over New York, so how can that be allowed but not pinball? Roger doesn't like this argument, saying it cheapens the game by comparing it to porn. He instead convinces the group to focus on the fact that pinball is a skill-based game, not luck, so therefore it isn't gambling. To prove his point, he'll play pinball in front of the city council. He begins practicing for the demonstration. The big day finally arrives, and Roger is very nervous. He starts off on the wrong foot with the council. He's very flustered and unused to all the attention on him. The council chairman is very dismissive, and Roger begins arguing with him and trying to prove his point. Things get heated, and the chairman agrees to the pinball demonstration. He insists that Roger play on the backup machine that they brought, saying he can't be sure they didn't rig the first one. Before playing, Roger steps out to call Ellen. He apologizes, saying there's all these people here and all I can think about is how she isn't one of them. She doesn't quite forgive him, but she says to call her and tell her how things go. Roger steps back inside the room and prepares to play pinball. He's surrounded by the council members and cameras and launches into a lecture about pinball being based on skill. He shows off his skills, showing how everything is on the board for a reason. He calls a few shots of where he'll hit the ball, and at the final called shot, the crowd erupts into cheers. Then the older Roger Sharpe, being interviewed, cuts in, saying that's not how it really happened. He called the shot, made it, and the chairman just said he'd seen enough. There wasn't a big celebration in the moment, but Roger helped lift New York's ban on pinball. Other cities took notice and lifted their bans as well. Roger's book did well, and that's about it. The interviewer asked Roger what happened with Ellen, and he says that's the real greatest shot he ever took. We see him on one knee, asking Seth for permission to marry his mom. The older Roger toasts the younger version of himself, celebrating his marriage. He goes on to say that he's now a consultant. He's been able to design a few pinball games himself. The two other sons he had with Ellen are also involved in the pinball industry now. Roger also specifies that this is a movie, and some things were changed to make the story more satisfying. He says he didn't need to practice on the machine. He didn't need to, since he'd been playing everything. The book didn't come out until after the city council hearing, and there are pictures of him playing pinball in the book, like in front of city council. More importantly, he would never sell one of his machines. They're like his children. We see the room brighten, and we see Roger sitting in the middle of several pinball machines, and they're all lit up. Mm-hmm. And that's the movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Things that stuck out.
Mm-hmm.
The cast is good.
Yeah, everyone did a good job.
Yeah, Mike Faced.
Yeah.
He does a good job as Roger. There's a pretty good resemblance to like young Roger. The mustache helps a lot.
Yeah.
But the voice that he has in that is really good.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Old Roger though is
Mhm.
also a very good casting. Like old
Yeah.
Roger, I think looks like.
He looks the most like what you would expect, or like it's a good.
Yeah.
Physically, the casting is very good. Of everyone looks like they could be related to each other, or like the same person, different life stages. Yeah, he also does a good job of like, it felt very natural. Like obviously in the first, I don't know, 30 seconds, then you see that this is clearly a staged interview setup, and that it's like it is presenting a fake documentary, basically. But like even with that context, then it's like the older Roger is very natural within it, where like he's shifting around, he's kind of uncomfortable, he's focusing on what matters to him and stuff, and it's everyone does a good job in this. Soundtrack is pretty good. I saw one of the reviews said that like one of the main things that this movie was missing was a killer soundtrack, but I feel like they had pretty good songs in it. So
yeah, I thought it was a good soundtrack. They made a joke about it as well.
Yeah,
because like older Roger, Mr. Sharpe, I guess, sets up. He's like, okay, here's the scene. Play John Lennon's "Imagine," and then they have like a
2
voice,
seconds.
a voice say, "No, we can't do that. That's way too expensive."
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. And then the interview, or like the meta interview format of having older Roger in the scenes and stuff, I thought that worked well.
Yeah. I also liked that when young Roger is going and like interviewing all of the pinball people, they show the interviews, but they're still kind of set up in a documentary way. Like it's not like they're just showing a conversation that you would see in a film or whatever.
It's what you would expect in like a Ken Burns documentary.
Yeah, and I really liked that because it looks good, and it was a fun like. This isn't a documentary. It is a narrative film, but it is actually trying to tell history and the real story.
Yeah.
Without it being like, oh, this is just an exposition dump. They're like clearly taking a moment and being like, no, we're separating this. This is the documentary part of this film.
I saw, for obvious reasons, I saw this movie compared to Tetris a lot. And like, I feel like this does things in a more satisfying way sometimes than Tetris did. Like Tetris obviously had a bigger budget.
Yeah.
But just like, the way that this is contained in the narrative, and like the way that they acknowledge that like, this is like a point of, or like this is a story about real events, versus Tetris being like, here's a car chase through Moscow now.
Over a video game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked how older Roger was like interjecting in some stuff where he's like, that's not what really happened, or the focus on Roger and Ellen's relationship is very prominent throughout the story, and it's like at first then like you see them meeting in the elevator, and then you see like their first date, and then the interviewer interjects and he's like, sorry, I think we're getting off topic here, like I want to learn about the pinball. And then they go back to like the pinball focus, and then by the end when it's like he says like, the truth is like much more anticlimactic, and then the interviewer is like, but what about Ellen? Like, what happened there? And then like you care about their relationship because of the way that it's presented. So
the actors also had really great chemistry.
Oh yeah.
Like nothing felt like, oh no, these people don't belong together. Or, like, it all felt very real, and it was just a fun, happy movie.
Yeah, even when it was like stressful, or like
in the down
parts still felt very grounded. And it never like, there are definitely moments where it focused more on the documentary context than others, but like even then it doesn't fully abandon it, where like it just lets you focus on the character tension and stuff, and I don't know, there's good elements of like the tension and the comedy and everything. So
so he's going to the adult bookstore to play pinball. He starts to like build a familiarity with Jimmy, the owner, I guess.
They keep establishing that he's a very Midwestern guy, so he's just like, what's your name?
And so he asks Jimmy, he's like, is this weird? that I'm playing this.
Mhm.
That I come here to play this. And then Jimmy was like, buddy, you're not even in the top 10
Yeah.
of weird. But then on one of his dates with Ellen is like, what's something that's embarrassing about yourself?
Yeah.
And he's like, let me show you.
Yeah.
And he takes her to the adult bookstore to play, like, to show her pinball.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jimmy, like, whispers and, like, mimes, top 5.
Yeah. Oh, he's like, yeah, he says, you're not even in the top 10. And then when he comes back from the job interview and he hugs the machine, and he's like, now you're in the top 10.
Yeah.
And then
Ellen
is there, and he's like, top 5. But then he's also there at their wedding celebration.
Yeah, which I thought was very fun.
I also liked when he brings Ellen to see the pinball machine, then like they're in the front room of the bookstore. So there's like the counter where Jimmy's at, and then there's the pinball machines, and then there's a curtain where everything else is, and you see like lights behind it and stuff. And Ellen is like, well, what's behind the curtain? And he's like, I don't ask. I don't want to know. So like he's never even been farther into the store.
Just the pinball.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else from the movie that we want to talk about?
I liked it.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
We watched it like we had kind of a lazy day because we haven't had a chance to do that in a while, and it was a very good movie to do that with.
Yeah.
So
it's like a tight 90.
Yeah.
So.
It's really well paced, I think.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Good movie.
Yep.
Yeah. Production facts. So this premiered at the Hamptons International Film Festival on October 8th in 2022. But it released in select theaters and video on demand on March 17th, 2023. It was released by Vertical Entertainment, who also released Beautiful Disaster.
Wow.
Coincidence?
It's not the production house.
No.
It's just the distribution.
It's the distribution company, which they do a lot of like quality indie distribution. So I think they just have a sweet deal with whatever that company was, Voltage.
Yeah.
So it's an hour and 35-minute runtime. It is not rated because it's a pretty low budget movie. I would say PG-13.
PG-13. They might say the F word more than once. I don't remember.
Yeah, that was the only thing.
Oh, that's right. So it isn't R.
No, it was the only thing that they didn't loop back in. Everything else in the movie is really tight, but there is a part where Roger is meeting with the chairman for the first time. The guy swears at him, and Roger stops himself from repeating the story, and he goes, "What rating are we going for? Can I swear?" And they're like, "You get 1 F-bomb." And he's like, "I'll save it."
Yeah.
And then he never swears. So I thought maybe like right at the end or something he would just be like, I would never effing sell one of my machines or something.
I mean, they could have like done one and maybe a test audience or something, like people didn't like it, so they did it without.
Yeah.
My guess is there was a scene where the F word was used and they cut it because it just didn't fit.
Yeah.
And so then that other joke didn't. Yeah.
But yeah, still good. It's got a 95% tomato meter. Thermometer with a 91% popcometer. It's a 64 out of 100 on Metacritic, and then a 7 out of 10 on IMDb ratings. There's a review from Disappointment Media, which is cool.
Way to just start off negative.
Yeah. It gave it a 3.5 out of 5, and it said the protagonist is certainly a likable hero, but what we get here is a story that feels relatively trite. The Braggs fail to convince us of the significance of saving pinball. There's a lot of discussion about why it's ridiculous that pinball was ever banned in the first place, but regardless of the agreeability of this argument, the film doesn't make a great argument as to why pinball deserves to stick around, which I get. Kind of, but then also there's a separate Roger Ebert review that gave it a 3 out of 4 stars, saying that that's what they liked about the film's charm, was like the low stakes make it like you can buy into it more because it's pinball. Like it's just always around. It's a hobby. It doesn't try and make it seem like Roger changed the world. They're like, it's a thing that is around, and it is ridiculous that it was banned for so many years. So I guess that either works for you or it doesn't. And then There is a quote from Richard Brody from The New Yorker. This is on the website for the film itself. It says, "This intricate yet breezy film is a feast of wryly nuanced acting, a giddy wonder, and also a warm-hearted, sharp-edged love story. It's better than all 10 of the Best Picture nominees, and 2023 will be a fine year in movies if there are 5 better lead performances than Feist or 5 better original screenplays." I picked that because it was along our lines of like 2023 is a wild year for movies.
Yeah.
And then in general, positive reviews. There are a lot of quotes that it's enjoyable, even if you aren't a fan of pinball. So yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that.
I assume it's impossible to find out whether this movie was a success.
Could not find a number for the budget of this movie. I saw one Reddit guess that said it was between 3 and 5 million. I think that's too low because this had the SAG-AFTRA stamp on it.
Yeah.
So I think
probably around 8 to 10.
That's what I was thinking. And also, like, it's a period movie that's going to be more expensive because you're looking for things that are like the right time period.
Yeah.
The art department gets bigger because of that, all of that fun stuff. So did not find box office numbers for it, even though it had a limited theatrical release. But the streaming numbers, according to Just Watch, it peaked at number 19 on the streaming charts, like across the board, and then it was in the top 100 of movies for 19 days. So like that's pretty good. But in general, I think it's like if you weren't looking for it or hadn't heard about it from word of mouth, then this probably didn't come up on your recommendations or anything. I have a very rough production timeline because, again, there's not a whole lot of concrete information about this movie. So the Bragg brothers are the writers and directors of this. They had a list of potential story ideas that they come up with. They cold call Roger Sharpe in February of 2020, and they talked to him for several hours about the pinball ban and his life around that moment, and then they decide to make a feature based off of that conversation. They figured, like, there's enough, like, of a personal angle, and it's a niche topic. It would make a good feature. They continued to talk to Roger during the course of the pandemic and then throughout the writing process. And then that documentary context with Roger interrupting the story developed from this, or like from these conversations. They said that there was a natural push and pull between them on what they could and couldn't keep true to life and what they wanted to like romanticize more and stuff. So that just felt like a natural progression from the writing process since Roger was there. And then it went into production in October of 2021. They had a production relationship with MPI already based on their previous short films that they did with them. That's the Motion Picture Institute. It was founded in the early 2000s. And then Vertical Entertainment Distribution deal is announced in December of 2022. So pretty straightforward as far as I can tell. They have 5 wins and 7 nominations for awards listed on IMDb. From Heartland, they're the 2022 winner of the Audience Choice Award and the IFJA Directorial Debut Award. At the Savannah Film Festival, they were the 2022 winner of Best Narrative Feature, or Cordillera International Film Festival. It's the 2023 winner, Grand Jury Prize, Best of the Festival Feature Film category. And then all other nominations for categories were from Best Narrative Feature. So not like comedy specific or anything. It was just narrative. There's no tagline for this movie. I'd say that's the other thing that I don't love about this movie is the title. Pinball, the Man Who Saved the Game. That implies to me that someone is named Pinball. But
I guess.
Like, I don't know.
They probably just needed a short, succinct title that told you what it was about, because if it was just called Pinball, then...
Yeah. Yeah, but, like, Roger Sharpe's book is also called Pinball, so I feel like The Man Who Saved the Game could have been a tagline or something. I don't know. It's a tiny critique.
Yeah, just this one isn't about pinball.
No, it's not.
It's about the man who saved the game.
Sharpe.
Yeah.
The Man Who Saved the Game. It was written and directed by Austin and Meredith Bragg. They're known as the Bragg brothers. They have a comedy background. This is their first feature film. They sold their web series, The Defenders of Stan, to Warner Brothers, and then they have many major award wins for their short film work. And then the MPI Original Films produced their previous short, A Piece of Cake, which did well at different festivals and stuff. So they know what they're doing, but this is their first feature. And then almost everything in this movie with Roger and Ellen's relationship came from real life. There's some quotes from the Bragg brothers in an NPR interview. Austin Bragg says, most everything in the movie is directly from what Roger told us. They're meeting in an elevator, playing with Ellen's son, Seth, at a bowling tournament together. And it was part of what drew us to this as a feature, that it wasn't just about this pinball story. There was more going on in his life that kind of paralleled a more universal theme. Meredith Bragg says, yeah, I would just say that we are not pinball people, so we did not come at this from a deep love and appreciation of pinball. I think that's grown since making this, but it was really everything else happening around Roger and the fact that there's this universal story we could tell about taking risks and the value of taking risks. The thing I kept seeing was like, Roger says like, the ball is gonna drain. It's about the choices that are on the board and like what you do with those choices and taking risks with them and everything. And then a quote I kept seeing was like, commitment is the biggest risk and reward of all. The pinball community was very supportive of this movie. There were positive reviews from people who know Roger's story well already. And then the Bragg brothers also said that the community was very helpful in sourcing pinball machines to actually use in the film. And then, like, in the credits, there was a big special thanks section of, like, everyone who offered their machines and everything. Joel Courtney was originally cast in the movie as Roger Sharpe, but had to drop due to personal reasons. And then Mike Faced seems to have replaced him the same month that they went into production.
Joel Courtney, if you don't know, is the kid from Super 8.
Yes.
Who hasn't really done that much.
The Kissing Booth is the other big thing that he's done recently. Yeah. And then the credits of the movie say no pinball machines were harmed in the making of this movie.
Which, in the movie, they make it seem like a pinball machine does break on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So I guess they made a fake pinball machine to be broken on the sidewalk.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
Yeah.
It's maybe a little lighter, but yeah.
It was a good, easy movie.
Yeah.
So.
Recommend it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can rate it now.
Mm-hmm.
Our rating system is out of 4 with 5 options. 0 out of 4 is, oh no, down the drain. 1 is, it was a movie. 2 is well made or enjoyable. 3 is enjoyable and technically good. 4 is Oscar worthy. I gave it a 4 out of 4.
Yeah.
I think it's a real solid movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think it's a solid movie, but I gave it a 3 out of 4.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
You hate pinball.
I do.
And the pinball community.
I do.
They're going to come after us now.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think the average score of 3.5 is solid.
Yeah.
So
that feels right for this.
Yep.
There's nothing that was missing from it or anything. It just didn't I don't know. It didn't take me by surprise in the same way that Polite Society did, because I was looking at our other ones that we gave a 3.5 to, and I gave that one a 4 and you gave it a 3. So it feels on the same level to me.
I'm also more of a pinball guy than you.
That's true.
I grew up with a pinball machine.
I did not.
Yeah. Well,
we all have biases.
Normally, we talk about other movies that we've watched, and I have actually watched quite a few movies, and maybe next time I will talk about one of them.
Okay.
But I actually want to talk about how you should watch Batteries Not Included, because the guy who plays older Roger, is in that movie.
He is.
Which is a beautiful, very sweet movie. And it's a happy movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should watch that. So that's the movie that I'm saying you should watch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Is there anything that you wanted
to? Just that we watched all of Interior Chinatown this weekend.
We did.
So
that's a good show as well.
It is a good show.
Yeah.
I would recommend that one.
Yep. Our short film, Hello, My Name is Friend Man, is out on YouTube. You should go watch it if you haven't already.
There's also some of that bonus content that we mentioned earlier. We've got a behind the scenes video on our Patreon.
It's out now.
That's out now.
Yep.
You can watch that if you want to.
Yep.
We will stop promoting this soon.
Eventually.
Yeah.
We have other projects that we are going to start promoting.
Yeah, we do. Save that to look forward to.
Remember to follow us in places, like, subscribe, whatever. But if you also leave questions and comments, then we'll respond to it on our other podcast, the Virtual House Sessions.
If there's any other movies that you want us to talk about, let us know, and we will do that. Other 2023 movies.
Yeah. But for now, we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.